So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's conference on the new UK domestic regime for goods. We're all familiar with the changes that have happened as a result of Brexit, and a number of these changes were postponed. A number of these changes are beginning to come in and take effect, and the change to the regime of classification for goods, qualification of goods is, as we all know, changing. And now we are facing the introduction of the UKCA system, which of course has an impact on everybody, and it's important that everybody understands how that what effect that will have, how it will change, and how it will evolve over time. Both in the UK and in Italy, the respective governments and respective civil servants are working closely together to make sure that everybody that's involved in movement of goods and in the importation of goods is aware of these changes, so that there are no hitches. Obviously there will be as we go through, but so that the information flow is kept as easy and as important as it possibly can be, to reduce and to take away the possibility. I'm sorry that there is an echo. I will try and move the microphone a little bit closer to perhaps avoid that. But I don't think there's an awful lot I can do. So I'll stop talking and let other people talk. This morning we have a very distinguished panel of speakers. I will be followed by Erin Fair, the policy advisor at BEIS, who will explain and present on the UKCA. He will be followed by Pietro Foschi, who is Group Executive Director of Assurance Services, and Sean Barham, Global Director for Product Certification Services at BSI. BSI, as I understand it, is a member of both of the British Chamber of Commerce for Italy, of which I am president, and also, of course, the Italian Chamber of Commerce and Industry in the UK. They will be followed by a Q&A moderated by Emily Spearpoint Walsh, and then the Alessandro Beruzzo, the president of the BCCI, will close the event this morning. I think in order to avoid any further echo or any further distortion of my voice presentation, and I've said enough anyway, I will pass to Erin Fair. Good morning, Erin.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And first, thank you so much to the British and Italian Chambers of Commerce for hosting us at this event, and the BSI for presenting along with us. We're very happy to be here today and appreciate the chance to speak to you about the UKCA. So my name is Erin Fair, as I say, and I work for the UK's Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Today, I'm going to be speaking to you about both the UKCA and UKNI markings. And we're going to outline what steps businesses will need to take in order to comply with the new marking regime. So first, just going to give you an overview of what our aim today is. Again, talking about the UKCA and UKNI marks. Just a couple of things for you guys to note. Like I say, we're going to be doing a Q&A after this. So please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. You know, you've got that menu on the bottom. Click the Q&A for that, and that will help us get to those questions at that point. Feel free to submit them throughout the presentation as well. It's not going to interrupt anything. Now, I do need to let you know that we aren't going to be able to cover every single situation in the time that we have. We're also not going to be able to give advice about individual circumstances or specific situations. However, we are going to be sharing these slides after the presentation. They do include links and some additional helpful information that will be after the presentation slides. So we're going to really encourage you to take a look at those and have a look at that further guidance that we've got for you after the presentation once we get a chance to send these out. So next slide, please. So I'm first going to give you a general overview of what the UKCA mark is and where it applies, and also the key dates that you're going to need to know as it comes into effect. So next slide. So the UKCA marking applies to all goods which previously required the CE marking. And also the reversed epsilon marking as well. Now, the UKCA is the new product marking for Great Britain, and this includes the countries of England and Scotland and Wales. Please note, I'm sure you've heard about this, there are different arrangements in place for Northern Ireland. You can continue, thanks, Emily. So you can continue using the CE marking if your good is self-assessed, or if you use an EU notified body to assess your product. Oh, sorry, could we just scoot back one slide? There we go. All right. So if your product is for Northern Ireland is being assessed by a UK notified body, then you will need to use the CE plus UKNI marking. Now, the circumstances under which this would happen is if you have operations in the UK and you're having your products conformity assessed um, for also the UK marking. So the CE plus UKNI is what you could use if you're using it for all markets. Now, since the 1st of January 2021, the essential requirements and standards that we use to demonstrate compliance for what we call new approach goods, in GB, these have all remained the same. So, for example, if you previously self-declared when using the CE marking, then you can also self-declare for using the UKCA. Now, you can also use both the CE and UKCA markings on the same product, as long as that product meets the requirements for each marking separately. This also applies if the product requires third-party testing for conformity assessment. So essentially, if you've got approval to use both of those markings, you can put them on the same good and on the same nameplate if you like. And also, just to let you know that the responsible authority for enforcement within the UK still remains the UK Trading Standards Body. Next slide, please. So on here, you're going to be able to see a list of the product areas that are covered by the UKCA marking. This list also includes measuring instruments, radio equipment, and echo designs. However, please note that there are special rules in place for medical devices, rail interoperability, construction products, and also civil explosives. Now, if your product doesn't fall under any of these product areas and you're unable to find any product specific legislation that's relevant to your goods, then we're going to advise you to visit our A to Z of industry guidance, which we're going to link to at the end. Um, we also advise you to check the general product safety regulations page on the gov.uk site. Additionally, speak to your trade association, and we encourage you to seek legal advice to ensure that your good is compliant when you're placing it on the market in GB. Now, first thing you need to do is work out which rules apply to your product. That's an important first step. But businesses should also consider whether you need to do anything else to get started. This might include getting a new approval for your products or appointing a new authorized representative or responsible person, as it's called under the CE rules. You may also need to make your supply chains aware of new duties which they may have. And you need to understand and make required changes to the marking and labeling. So I'm going to review these in the coming slides, but I also encourage you to visit the guidance page and links that we're going to have at the end of this presentation for more information. So, next slide, please. All right. So we want to give you a reminder of the key dates that you need to know as this comes into effect. The most important deadline is the 31st of December 2022. This is when most products, except for medical devices, must have the UKCA marking. Now, the rules for medical devices recognize the CE mark for longer, so they have an additional 6 months, and their deadline is the 30th of June 2023. That's when they'll need to start using the UKCA. Now, we do want to note that this is the final deadline. We do strongly encourage you to begin preparing for this as soon as possible, particularly if your product requires third-party testing. Now, we do have a labeling easement in place. What that means is that for the UKCA label only, not for importer details, which I'll get to later, but until the end of 2023, you can apply that UKCA marking using either a sticky label directly on the product, or you can place it on an accompanying document. However, after the 31st December 2023, that marking must be applied indelibly to the product. Indelibly means you can't remove it before it reaches the end user. All right, next slide. So I'm now going to talk about the definition for when we say placing goods on the GB or NI market. Next. So placing a good on the market is a key concept. And when we say that, we're referring to when an individual manufactured good is first made available for distribution, consumption, or use on the GB market. This would be in the course of commercial activity. Now, placing a good on the market refers to each individual good, not a type of good. So, to prove that you've placed a product on the market, you can use the documents that you normally use in business transactions. This can include an invoice or a contract of sale. Now, under the legislation, The only economic operators who can place goods on the market are manufacturers and importers. Now, when a manufacturer or an importer supplies a good to a distributor or to an end user in GB for the first time, the good is definitely considered placed on the market. Any subsequent operation, if it's mentioned within your product's legislation, is defined as making available. Now, when a good is made available, it must comply with the legal requirements that were in place at the time it was placed on the market. Now, there is some machinery legislation that refers to the term of putting into service. This takes place the first time a good is used in GB by the end user for its intended purpose. If the legislation that covers your goods uses both terms of placing on the market and putting into service, then the UKCA requirements must be met before either of those two happen. Right, next. So this slide is a summary of the process that you'll need to follow to get the UKC marking on your goods when you're placing those goods on the GB market. So once you've established that you'll need the UKCA marking, then you need to check the route for conformity assessment. This is whether you can self-declare or if you need to have your product tested. And this will typically be the same requirement as it is for when you've used the CE marking. Um, you then must get your product tested or follow the procedures for self-declaration. This will include keeping the relevant documentation, which I'll talk more on. You then need to apply the UKCA marking to your product. And once you've followed all the appropriate procedures and place the UKCA marking on your product, you can then place it on the GB market. Right, next. That, can we scooch back one or two? Okay. All right. So, sorry, next one. Apologies, everybody. All right. So, I'm now going to talk about economic operators. Oh, so, okay, thanks about that. Yeah, so we're just going to talk about economic operators, including what their roles and responsibilities are. All right. So, next slide. All right. So, it's important that you check whether your legal responsibilities have changed as of the 1st of January 2021. Primarily, if you were previously considered a distributor within the single market, you may now be considered an importer for the UK and vice versa. As in the EU, importers have more responsibilities than distributors. Now, if you use an authorized representative, they can no longer be based in the EU for the GB market and vice versa. Now, to note that authorized representatives, again, this is the UK's equivalent in many ways of a responsible person. However, an important difference between the CE and the UKCA marking is that authorized representatives are generally optional for the UK market. Now, this is another area why it's very important to check what product-specific legislation applies to your good, because if you are required to use an authorized representative, it will say so there. One EU rule to be aware of is that as of the 16th of July, 2021, a new regulation came into effect, which means that you may need to appoint an EU authorized representative if there's no other economic operator in place. This is if you're exporting from the UK to the EU or NI. So again, if you have UK-based operations, that's most relevant to you. Please do consult the gov.uk and EU Commission guidance regarding this to stay up to date. All right, next. So these are the key economic operators and how we define them. That's what we outlined on this slide. I'll just quickly run through. So a manufacturer is someone who manufactures a product or has a product designed or manufactured, which they then advertise for sale under their own name or trademark. Now, you're an importer if you're the first person to place goods on the market from an external market. It's important to note that importer definition for goods regulation does vary from the definition that's used in customs. Customs definition is much broader, so take note of that difference if you're figuring that out. For purposes of placing goods on the market, an importer is anyone who brings a third country product into a given market and supplies it to the GB market. Now, because obviously since the EU exit, the EU-based countries like Italy are an outside market or a third party country or a third country. Sorry. Finally, a distributor is a person other than the manufacturer or importer who also makes the good available on the market. Finally, an authorized representative is a person who is legally appointed by the manufacturer to undertake specific tasks on their behalf. Next. Now, importers also have specific labeling responsibilities. If you're an again, you are an importer if you're the first person to place that good on the market in Great Britain from an external market. The EU is now considered an external market to Great Britain, which means that you may be an importer where you were previously a distributor. If you are an importer, you must label the goods that you have imported with your details. These details include your name, your registered or your registered trade name or trademark, so one of those, including the postal address, which all need to be on the good. For a postal address, usually just a number and street name and postcode will suffice. Now, to make it easier for you, we are allowing you to provide these details on the packaging or an accompanying document until the end of 2022. Now, from the 1st of January 2023, you will have to attach these details directly to your products. Um, and certain legislation may allow these details to be placed on the packaging or placing them on an accompanying documentation. This is an alternative to affixing them on the goods themselves. Whether you're allowed to do this will be outlined in your product-specific legislation, or if your good is too small to reasonably fit either the minimum UKCA size, 5 millimeters, or improbable to affix the importer details, you can also then attach it to accompanying documentation. All right, next. So I'm now going to talk to you about the routes to assessment and the various actions that you need to take in order to achieve that. So next. So one of those routes to assessment is self-assessment. Now, in the GB market, you can self-declare for the UKCA mark in the same way that you would for the CE mark. However, we do encourage you, as always, to check that relevant legislation that applies to your goods to ensure that you can self-declare your good. But again, if you've been able to self-declare for the CE, then you're likely going to be able to self-declare for the UKCA. So in the Northern Ireland market, self-declaration rules also remain unchanged, so you should therefore continue to follow EU rules with that marking. Next. So the second route to assessment is third-party assessment. Any goods that are placed on the market in GB that require third-party testing will now need to be tested by a UK-based assessment body. These third-party assessment bodies are also referred to as notified bodies in the EU. All UK bodies automatically became UK-approved bodies, so they serve the same form and function. It's just a different name at this time. The main difference between the UK-approved bodies and the EU notified bodies is that the approved bodies can test for the UKCA marking for the GB market. However, UK-approved bodies cannot test for the CE marking for the EU market. We do have a list of all of the UK-approved bodies on the UK MCAB database, which folks are interested in. I'm happy to provide a link to at the end of this as well. Um, please note that in Northern Ireland, they are still notified bodies, and given that they still follow EU rules. So as a general reminder, please note there are still different rules for the market in Northern Ireland, but you can still use EU notified bodies with Northern Ireland. Now, again, in the Northern Ireland market, you can apply either the CE or the UKNI plus CE mark to demonstrate compliance. To certify for the CE mark, again, as you know, you can use an EU notified body, which you find on the NANDO database. And to certify for the UKNI plus CE mark, businesses can use a UK notified body, again, which you can find on our UK MCAB database. The CE marking must always accompany the UKNI marking. Please note that while CE mark goods cannot be placed on the EU market, but UKNI plus CE mark products cannot. So if you're placing products on both the GB and EU markets, you will need to make sure that you have separate certificates for each market, one from a UK approved body and one from an EU notified body. We also encourage any of you manufacturers to speak to your conformity assessment bodies as soon as possible if you haven't already. This is to help you understand what options you have to arrange conformity assessment testing for the UK and EU markets where needed, because we do have guidance on subcontracting. So, like I say, we advise you to speak to your notified bodies and just see what their plans are for working with potentially UK-based conformity assessment bodies. Right, next. So you need to keep documentation to show that your product conforms with the regulatory requirements. This might be requested at any time by market surveillance authorities. So the information you must keep depends on the specific legislation which applies to your product and which economic operator you are in the supply chain. So this may include a technical file, which would cover how the product is designed and manufactured, how the product has been shown to conform to the relevant requirements, and the addresses of the manufacturer and any storage facilities. Now, a UK declaration of conformity should include a declaration that the product conforms to the relevant requirements and has the name and address of the manufacturer as well. Um, so the UK Declaration of Conformity is similar to the EU Declaration of Conformity. And again, we strongly recommend that you have separate certificates for both markets well in advance of the 1st of January 2023. All right, next. So I'm now briefly going to go over placing manufactured goods on the Northern Ireland market. Again, this is from a regulatory perspective, so we're not going to be talking about customs, tariffs, or other arrangements as they have a different set of rules for those. So, next. So, goods will need to meet EU regulatory requirements to be placed on the market in Northern Ireland. This is for as long as the Northern Ireland Protocol is in force. Now, as Northern Ireland continues to align with EU rules, this means the CE marking continues to be the conformity marking for most new approach goods. You will continue using the CE marking for Northern Ireland if you self-declare or if you use an EU notified body to carry out mandatory conformity assessment testing. Products which have had mandatory conformity assessment by a UK-based notified body cannot be placed on the market in the 27 EU member states. In this case, they will need the CE plus UK NI marking to be sold in Northern Ireland. Now, the UK NI marking is only for those goods which have undergone mandatory third-party conformity assessment by a body that's based anywhere in the UK. So if you're doing most of your testing operations in Italy, then it would make you would not be using the UK NI mark most likely. Goods bearing the UKCA marking alone are also not valid for the NI marking, but the UKCA marking can also appear alongside the correct markings for Northern Ireland. So you could theoretically have a CE plus UK NI marking and a UKCA marking all in the same product if they've been assessed for all of those markets. Right, next. So, as with responsibilities for importers and distributors between the GB and the EU, there's also different responsibilities for those in the Northern Ireland supply chain. So, if you bring items into Northern Ireland from the UK or another non EEA country and place them on Northern Ireland market, you're then considered an importer. To place goods on the Northern Ireland market for the first time, an importer will need to be in either the Northern Ireland or in the EU or in the EEA. Again, this is because Northern Ireland continues to follow EU rules at the moment. Now, currently, if there are no importers in place, then you can use an authorized representative, which will be required for your goods under the relevant EU product legislation. The authorized representative must be based in Northern Ireland or in the EEA. Now, if you place goods on the market in Great Britain from outside the UK, this includes businesses based in Northern Ireland. So, for example, goods supplied from a Northern Ireland business from the EU, and then these goods are seen as crossing from outside the UK and into the GB market. In this case, the businesses based in Northern Ireland would be an importer, and the goods would need to be labeled with the importer details of the Northern Ireland based business. Now, a Northern Ireland business can qualify for, they can place qualifying CE or CE plus UK NI markings on goods for the GB market. And this is part of the UK's government's commitment to delivering unfettered access for qualifying Northern Ireland goods moving to the rest of the UK market. All right, next. All right, so we're just going to get towards wrapping up. And I just want to talk to you about a little bit of support that we have. I also want to ask you guys to get your smartphones out and open up your camera apps because I have 2 QR codes that I'm going to ask you guys to scan. Next slide, please. So not quite yet though. So again, I've said over and over that the first step is to understand the specific requirements for your goods and to check those regulations. So we've got all sorts of links on here that are going to help you out with the detailed bits on this. And this is what we'll be sharing after the webinar event. So you'll be able to have access to these and click through on your own. Next slide. Now, this is our first QR code, and this is to access the A to Z of industry guidance. This guide gives you details about what your obligations would be as a manufacturer or an importer, a distributor, or an authorized representative. This will also help you find the product-specific regulations that will outline your conformity assessment requirements and whether you can self-declare or not. And again, it's critical that you check these. So the way that you use a QR code, by the way, if you haven't done it before, is hold your smartphone's camera app over that code. It doesn't need to zoom in or be super focused, but a link will pop up on screen. Click that, and that will take you straight to our site. And next one. Again, if you haven't had a chance to get to it, don't worry, you will have access to these. All right, and here, so we are constantly working on making our guidance clearer, better to understand, and on finding ways to reasonably implement this for businesses and ways that cut down barriers for you guys. So we want you guys to be alerted as to when and if we have any updated guidance. Sorry. So what you can do with this, all you need is an email address, and you will be sent a notification as soon as we've published guidance updates. We also have an every 2-month newsletter that will just sum up any updates that you may have missed or forgotten to read, with a bit more information about what our current frequently asked questions are, because we keep track of what we're being asked. So you'll get the most relevant information that your colleagues in business are asking of BEIS. Next. All right. All right, so on here, you'll also see it's just got a link to our gov.uk webpage, and it also has our goods regulation inbox. We aim to get back to folks within 10 working days, but we do expect that we're going to get a bit busy with this. But if you have questions that weren't answered by today's webinar, please send us an email. Again, be advised that we can't let you know about your specific individual circumstances because we're not in a position to give individual advice, but we'd be happy to clarify regulations for you if you've got more questions. And then following this, there are a couple of flow charts that I'm not going to go through because you'll have time to view those on your own. So I'm going to wrap this up then and hand it back to our hosts and say thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this.
Thank you very much, Erin. It's very interesting. I'd like to pass to Pietro Foschi and Sean Barham of BSI.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and good morning, everyone. Thank you to you, Erin, for this very, very insightful summary of the rules. I'm glad to be with all of you today representing BSI. I'm Group Executive Director of BSI for the Assurance Services Division, and I'm also Board Director of the Italian Chamber of Commerce in the UK. I'm today accompanied by two expert colleagues of mine, Sean Barham, Group Product Certification Director, and Vishal Thakur, who is our UK approved body head for medical device regulatory service from the Regulatory Service Division. Will allow further questions to be addressed. Before jumping into the detail of the UKCA, just let me allow to give an insight on why BSI is an enabler of this new rule to be coming into life. If you go to the next slide, Sean, please. The next one. So BSI is the UK national standard body. Is the first national standard body of the world, and it develops a standard on behalf of the UK community, and is also a founding member of ISO. ISO is the International Standard Organization for Standardization. We are a founding member, and we contribute directly and proactively to the development and diffusion of standardization of best practices around the world. As national standard body, we have the responsibility not only of developing new standards. We develop over 2,400 standards every year, or updates standard that need to be adjusted to the new context. We also take out around 1,000 or so standards from our library that counts over 60,000 standard of best practices available for the world over to be accessed and digested. Those standards are an important piece of our mission because they are a collection of best practice, a collection of best practice on a given topic best practice on which the world over expert that are gathered to develop a standard agree upon at a certain point in time, and therefore are a platform for further innovation and efficiency of trade, manufacturing, and business overall. And we are very proud to contribute to that. We do develop those standards, gathering over 13,000 experts from around the world on the different topics, which we call committee members. And then we have the responsibility and the opportunity to help companies around the world and professionals around the world to absorb those best practice standards in their operation, in their product, in their services. We do it with over 5,500 colleagues, serving 85,000 clients in 195 countries. So we operate the world over. And we are a royal charter by status, which is a particular status of the UK context, whereby we are no shareholders, which allow us a unique ability to be totally independent from any interest whatsoever. And we have the obligation to reinvest the results of our commercial activity into the perennity of our business, to continue to fulfill our purpose, which is to facilitate trade and business improvement, inspiring trust for more resilient. We are headquartered in the UK, in London, and as I said, we operate in 195 countries. The next slide shows that we are organized in 4 divisions. So the knowledge solution division, which is the one that develop and maintain the standards I was mentioning before. The assurance services division that I have the responsibility to lead, which provide the management system certification, the product certification and testing services. The SHAM is leading at global level, but also provide training and qualification services globally. The regulatory service division, which is particularly focused on the compliance of medical devices manufacturers and their equipment, from which Vishal is the head of compliance. And the consulting services division, in particular in health and safety and environmental matters, but also digital trust advisory services and consultancy around reliability of supply chain the world over. So this is about BSI, and therefore we are very, very active on allowing clients to ensure that their product and services are compliant with local regulation and requirement. We allow clients to ensure market access to different markets. Of course, the UK and Northern Ireland, we are going to go deeper in a few moments, but also the continental Europe market, being a notified body for CE marking, but also recognize body for other markets that are very relevant for our clients in Australia, in Asia, in Middle East, and the world over, applying the innovation of the international electric technical requirements. On top of that, we also provide the BSI kite mark, which is ensuring not only compliance, but additional compliance of products and services to the local regulation, but also compliance to additional standards that will enhance the quality and reliability of product and services as the client so chooses. We call it the Bsi Mark of Trust. So that allow us to provide clients with the full knowledge of the different rules and regulations their products needs to comply with if they want to access multiple markets. If we go back to the situation of the UK and European market evolution, as you know, you can go to the next slide, Sam. As you know, following the referendum from the January 2020, UK was no longer part of the European Union, and there was a transition period that is illustrated in simplified fashion in the next slide, which gives the timing. Herring was illustrated very clearly, whereby from the 1st of January 2023, UKCA is recognized, and from that moment, the CE marking is no longer recognized and accepted for product introduced into the UK market, with the only exception of medical device that have an additional 6 months transition period. Up until the 1st of January 2023, product can be having and are recognized and accepted both with the CE marking and UKCA for this transition period. If you go to the next slide, Sean. To keep things very simple, what the CE mark and the UKCA means? Well, they both means that the product is compliant with the relevant regulation that apply to that market. The CE marking for regulation that apply to the European Union market, and the UKCA for the relevant regulation that apply to the UK market. Today, the regulations are identical, but the ambition of this movement is allow divergence of this regulation, which would make things a bit more articulated, and that's where the double marking will be necessary. We'll go more in the details of how that can be operated, allowing our colleagues to provide support to clients and operators the world over to make this happen. Sham, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pietro. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much as well for the Italian Chamber of Commerce for inviting us to speak on this webinar. And Erin, well done on the presentation that you've done. You've covered most of the stuff. I'm going to try to avoid repetition, but rather give more examples and illustrate more of what Pietro was talking about. So Pietro gave an example of the CE and the UKCA, where each one of them looking after the specific regulation. One is the regulation for the United Kingdom, of course, and one is the regulations for the European Union. This is just an example of illustration that so far the regulations are the same, whether they are in the UK or in Europe. The differences, there are minor differences so far with the potential divergence that goes into the future. The only differences so far that we need to recognize is when we speak about the different regulation, we need to mention them into the product document or product information manual and so on. You can see this. I just tried to put some examples on that. As Erin said at the beginning, we will be sharing those slides later on with you. And if any further support is required, of course, we are here to help. But this is just an example of what is a directive or regulation in the EU and what is a UK regulation. They adopt the same regulation or the same content or the same standard, whether that is a British standard or an EN standard, because BSI still remain its position in the SEN and CELAC, whether that is the same or not, but just the differences of the naming, where one refer to directives and regulations for the EU and one referring to the UK regulation. The key differences for now, you'll see, I gave you an example on the EU Declaration of Conformity, and then you have the UK Declaration of Conformity, definitely because one is referring to the United Kingdom and one is referring to the European Union. The other thing that Erin as well highlighted, where we do have a notified body and an approved body. With a little bit of, I wouldn't call it complexity, but we need to be remembering that all notified body in the UK, they are an approved body as we speak, and they are a notified body as well for Northern Ireland. So BSI will maintain its position as a BSI, as a notified body for Northern Ireland, an approved body for the United Kingdom or for Great Britain. And of course, BSI, the Netherlands, which you will see later on, is a notified body carrying a number for 2797 for the European Union. This is something that I really want to highlight, and we've been seeing for the last couple of years since the decision was made on the CE and the UKCA. If you go to the NANDO website, where you can find every single notified body, you can get the information either alphabetical or by the number of the notified body. You will see that there are around 600 notified body on the NANDO website, versus till we speak today 135 approved body, or it could be a bit more, but this information is literally from around 4 or 5 days ago. So you'll see that there's a big difference between what was available as a notified body for the product to be conformity assessed and certified versus 135 approved body. And of course, BSI in a great position, didn't come by luck, working in our business continuity plan for quite some time when we put the plan for the BSI notified body, where we do have both of the scopes in the approved body and the notified body, similar whether that is in Europe or in the UK. But that will just generate the amount of pressure, and that's what we're trying to help the organizations around the world, either by providing content like this, discussing with them, and of course, collaborating with other notified bodies in Europe, just to make sure that the transition journey for the client is as smooth as it can be. We've mentioned the approved body, so like the NANDO website, the approved body, which you can get the UKM cap, and of course you can find BSI Assurance UK Limited. You can click on that and you'll see all the directives that they are mentioned and all of the things that we can, it is in our scope to be able to audit it. For those who's been, of course, working on the self-declared and the notified body requirement, it is exactly the same for the UKCA. So things like some of the electrical equipment, some of the toys, some of the machinery, not all of them, they don't necessarily require a third party, but it does require definitely an approved body, sorry, non-approved body, because self-declare, you can just self-declare it following the standard requirement, versus the UKCA that is required for approved body. And here we put the BSI number, which is the 0086, where we can provide the UKCA 0086. Most of the construction products, the radio equipment, the PPE, dangerous machinery, pressure equipment, lifts, and so on. The link is here when we will share the information. This is the government link for all of the guidance on the products that requires approved body versus the products that they don't necessarily require an approved body. We receive a lot of questions. Can we put 2 marks on the product? The answer is yes. And again, if that product is does require an approved body and a notified body. So if you are selling your product in the UK and in Europe, you can put both of the marks or combine the marks, both of them, on your product. Erin mentioned, and we will discuss as well later on, that you can currently for the UKCA just stick it or write it on the information, but later on after the 2024, you have to put it on the product. You'll see that the number for the BSI Netherlands notified body, which is the CE 2797, and then the UKCA 0086. And of course, because BSI and some of our competitors, I wouldn't say many as well, they are in this position where we do have our scope for notified body and approved body. We help our clients, as I mentioned earlier, to have a smooth transition. We don't necessarily need to do, if you are an existing CE client for 2797 and your test had been following the requirement for CE, your product test following the requirement and the regulation for CE mark, as we said earlier, the regulatory requirements so far almost identical. So BSI can help you and can make that transition smooth. We will still need to do some of the certification and admin work, absolutely, where you just share with us how you comply or intend to comply with the UK regulation, referring to the UK regulation instead of the European regulation. But sometimes people are really worried about it. If you are an existing CE mark, it's not a huge amount of work, and BSI is here to help, absolutely. Remember when we said you could just put a simple stick a UKCA mark, or you can just put it in a document accompanying the product, that is allowed till the end of 2023. However, from the 2024 onward, January, you have to have it on the product, like the CE mark, that you have it on the product. And if it's required approved body, you have to have the number, of course, as well, of the approved body. This can be different for the medical devices, some of the construction product regulation and the marine equipment. We've heard as well earlier from our colleagues in BEIS that there are different timeline and different timing for them. But again, they will provide the same relaxation time, but after that time you have to put it. Now, how you can declare the conformity, where you put the name and the address of the manufacturer, what is the product or the identification or the model number, because that can be a big difference between a model number to another. What are the applicable regulations? Remember when I said that if you already did the test, the application or the information is just to share with us which regulation are applicable to that product for which market. And it is the UK approved body certificate, the standard or the solutions applied, date of issue, and name and signature. This is pretty much the UK Declaration of Conformity. Again, you can just click on the link and get those information. And this is, again, the government link for that. Where standards sit in regulation? Regulations in the UK and in Europe and in many other countries around the world recognize the importance of standards. Therefore, you will see a lot of regulations depending on a collective of standards or one standard or vice versa, whether they presume conformity of the standard or where the regulation taking the information from. The appropriate standards, now called designated standard in the UK, instead of the harmonized standard, these are identical to the EU list. I've mentioned that earlier, so again, not a big worry. I've heard a lot of worrying last year and this year. Oh, we need to do a lot of work. It's not a lot of work. If you've done your homework well in CE Mark, UKCA will not be much more difficult if you follow the requirements exactly. And again, we can help. And of course, vice versa. If you've done your homework well for the UKCA, it will not be that big difference. Of course, that's the link where you can get as well all the guidance and the designated standard that is relevant to the regulation. Divergence, I personally put that here as well because we do receive a lot of questions on divergence. Will they diverge? Most probably the answer is yes, but it's not 100% confirmed. There is a minor divergence as we speak, and I'll show you an example later on it. But currently, it's identical. All the regulations are largely identical, but that does not mean that they will diverge in the future. And definitely, when they will do, you will get those information, and you will be able to update the requirement of your product to meet the regulatory requirement. Remember when I said most of these things are exactly the same? The BSI remains committed and remains committed to the membership of the SEN and SELAC. BSI as an NSB, remember Pietro at the beginning explained the national standard body role within a British standard institution, and we will continue to use the European standard for most products. But this is an example where it's a very short divergence where you can see the European Union flag at the top of the EU energy label versus the UK energy label. So really small divergence as we speak, hence why I'm saying get on the journey. The journey is not too difficult, and either us or BEIS or a different support that you can get via the trading authorities or your legal colleagues. If you understand it well, the journey is not too difficult. Northern Ireland. So the first slide, it's where the products are going. If you remember, Erin mentioned on the protocol on the Anglo-Irish agreement, which introducing hard borders very difficult. And manufacturers in Northern Ireland, they do have an unfettered trade with the Republic of Ireland and the rest of the UK. So they will be able to trade with them even that. But just very quickly, two examples where if you are supplying goods into the Northern Ireland, they need to follow the requirement of the EU regulation. They need to comply, but that comply indicated by the CE Mark. Goods from non-EU, including Great Britain, so all the goods that are coming from all over the world, except from European Union, are imported. Remember when as well Erin mentioned about distributor. So goods from the EU are distributed in Northern Ireland, but that goods are going into Northern Ireland from any other country but EU, they are imported. So therefore, an authorized representative cannot, where required, cannot be in Great Britain. Just be aware that the UK CA mark is not acceptable in Northern Ireland. Remember when again I said we are a notified body for Northern Ireland? So that notified body status can allow us to issue the CE mark UK NI with the notified body number 0086. And that's the third example in the table, or the third row in the table. And that's what I called UK notified body number. If we're going to use the CE mark, which is as well accepted, so if the notified body use is a notified body within Europe, then a CE mark of 2797 or any other mark from a notified body will be accepted to sell product in Northern Ireland. If there's no need for a notified body, self-declared, if you remember we talked about it, the CE mark will be enough for products to be sold in the Northern Ireland. Vice versa, so if products will go from Northern Ireland into the UK or into the rest of the UK, Great Britain, they do, as I said, have an unfettered access to the entire of the UK market. But that is for qualifying goods only. And I think qualifying goods defined on the Gov website as largely manufactured in the Northern Ireland. If that happens, no further approvals are required. If they have CE or they have UKNI, even if they have CE mark, you might say, but CE is not approved in the UK or in Great Britain. CE for goods that coming from Northern Ireland will be approved into the rest of the UK or into Great Britain. I would like to stop here. Thank you very much for listening. I'll hand back to our host or our colleagues in the Chamber of Commerce for any questions or any discussions. I'll stop sharing now. And I think there are quite some questions as well.
Thank you very much, Sean. And apologies, Michelle, for not including you in the list of when I was presenting the people from BSI. I'd like now to pass over to Emily Spearpont-Walsh, who is going to moderate the Q&A session.
Hi there, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for all of the excellent presentations so far. So I'm one of Erin's colleagues at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy on the UKCA International team. So we've got a few questions so far, about 5 questions. So please feel free to keep putting any others in the chat or in the Q&A section for us to answer, but I will go through the ones that we've got so far. So the first one we got through was about having the UKCA market on a product which is very small. So if specified in the legislation, the UKCA marking has to be on the product itself. However, there are some legislation that allows for it to be on the packaging or accompanying documentation. For example, in cases like the one that this person has mentioned, where it is not practical to put it on the product directly. The circumstances in which this is allowed for UKCA marking mirrors the rules for CE marking. So if you're currently using the CE marking, then you'll be able to use that to guide you. But please do check the relevant legislation for your product to make sure that this is applicable. So if for Northern Ireland it is enough for us to use EU rules, what is the UKNI mark? So we do get this question quite a lot. So the UKNI marking is often used by British companies because if they're using a UK conformity assessment body, then they'll be able to use that body also for UKNI. So for an EU company who's using the CE marking, it does make more sense for Northern Ireland to be using the CE marking, but the option is there. Another question I've got, is it possible for an importer to use on the product the name of the website of the company instead of the address or postal code? So as an importer, you're responsible for indicating your details. That includes name, registered trade name or registered trademark, and postal address, which is usually a number, street and postcode on the good. The legislation sometimes permits placing these details on packaging or placing them on accompanying documentation as an alternative to affixing them to the goods themselves. So just to explain, the imported details are labelled for traceability purposes. So a physical location needs to be legible and on the good. So a website is not enough there. There's also a question about authorised representatives. So if an EU company appoints an authorised representative, can they act as an importer as well? If that would be the case, the EU company would avoid looking for an importer. So a manufacturer may appoint in writing a UK-based authorised representative to carry out certain tasks under the legislation. Sorry, let me just get my notes back. Under the legislation. Under the legislation, an authorised representative is mandatory under some legislation, but in most cases, authorised representative is voluntary. Depending on the legislation, so again, please do check the legislation for your good, the authorised representative may draw up a UK Declaration of Conformity, affix the UKCA marking, keep technical documentation, and is required to cooperate with market surveillance authorities. Under the legislation, the role of an authorised representative is usually different to that of an importer. However, authorised representative is also acting as an importer or a distributor. They do need to fulfil the obligations of those economic operators under the legislation as well. So please do check the legislation to understand your full responsibilities and to confirm that this is possible for your good. And the final question that I've got through, I've been looking in the Q&A and in the chat, so this should cover the ones that had come through during these presentations. But after I finish this one, Erin and myself will look through any other questions that have come through since. So please do continue to ask more questions if you have them. So the final one was, this all seems rather complex and time consuming. What would you recommend for a new business in the food and beverage industry? Is there a specialized company that can take care of all of this in my place? Thank you. So the first bit about it being complex and time consuming, we would say, to reassure you, things are the same as for the CE marking at the moment. So as a new company, if you are being conformity assessed or going through the process to get the CE marking, the current process does mirror that for the UKCA marking. So it may seem complex and time consuming, but the steps are exactly the same at the moment. The regulations are the same. So please be reassured that if you're doing them both at the same time to get both of the markings on your product, that may make it less time consuming. And in terms of the question about food and beverage industry, this would be one for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which is DEFRA. So would recommend you getting in touch with them. But do feel free, if you can't find a relevant contact, to email the goods regulation inbox, and we can pass on your query to a contact in DEFRA. So I think that's all the questions that we had so far. Erin, have some more come through while I've been answering them?
Yep, we've had a couple of more come through, and thanks so much for that, Emily. It's fantastic. Yeah, and on the DEFRA note, if you are dealing with food type goods, it is most likely that the UKCA does not apply to your good. So DEFRA is the organization you confirm that with, but you should be exempt from food products with this. So we've had a question come in from let's see, manufacturer of several different types of products dealing with Atex and the Pressure Equipment Directive. So just want to make sure I'm reading this thoroughly. So yeah, if you decide to extend your qualification from CE to include the UK market, those standards, so the standards that you have for a CE marking will be labeled as EN and a number. The UK also has equivalent standards. And that is why the A to Z of industry guidance. So if you click through to that, look under Atex and Pressure Equipment Directive, that will have your product specific legislation. That will also have what the transfer of those European standards to the UK standards are. They do have different numbers and labels on them, but they are equivalents there. So you're able to find that. You will need to draw up two different, by dossier, I'm assuming that you mean Declaration of Conformity and or technical file. You will want to have two declarations of conformity. It's not an explicit requirement, but it's one of those things that will make your life easier. You'll be more future-proofed if you do that. In terms of a technical file, so that's a question of, I think theoretically you could be using the same for those, but you need to make sure that it references, because it needs to list the standards that your goods were manufactured to comply with. It needs to be listed for those UK standards when you're doing that. But like I say, we do have those equivalency standards listed in that A to Z of industry guidance. So please look for all of the sort of regulations that your goods do fall under. And like I say, if you're confused about that, if you need some more information, please get in touch on the goods regulation address. Next question that we've had is that, so your distributor in, let's see, selling to a distributor in the UK with CE marked products. You want to know about UKCA certification. So the deadline for when you need to start using the UKCA is the 1st of January 2023. Now, we currently have, as part of our transition arrangements, that goods that are placed on the market by 31st of December 2022 or before, so the rest of this year, that those goods can still continue to be circulated until they reach their end user with just the CE marking. So if you have placed those goods on the market, and by that I mean so the goods don't physically have to be in the UK, but that agreement of sale to that UK distributor who may now be considered an importer. So in your supply chain, please do check, because if you're selling CE goods and that distributor is the first one to place them for sale on the market in GB, then they will likely count as an importer and will have some additional responsibilities. But yeah, you should be fine as long as those contracts of sale are put together before the 1st of January 2023, then you can continue to circulate with the CE. I hope that answers your question. Yep.
Just have a look and see if any more have come.
Let's see, so we got UK company, and you've got a unique label for products that you use for all of your markets. Let's see, how can you report on the unique label the name of each European importers? So the importer details do not have to be on the same nameplate or whatever label you're using for the UKCA or CE markings. So I know that a lot of products do come with a nameplate where you put everything on there, but if you wish to have them separately, that's fine. Just the relevant details need to be affixed on the good for the market that they're destined for. See, what we also have is the UKCA compulsory for clothes sold to the UK. Does UKCA also affect clothes to manufacturers? So generally clothing, that's more affected by our rules of origin team when it comes to the type of materials that things are made from. But generally, unless they fit under PPE or personal protective equipment, clothing's generally not considered in that. Again, without knowing the details of what type of clothing you're talking about, please go to our A to Z of industry guidance and have a look at the specific product categories that are covered by this. But just general clothing, generally not. Let's see. So we've had a request for contact at DEFRA, and Emily has put that into the chat. Fantastic. Yeah, that is going to be their website.
Yeah, but yeah, you're welcome. If you can't find the information you need on the website, you're very welcome to send an email to our inbox, and we can help you sort out finding out the relevant contact for your query.
Okay. And forgive me for pronunciation if I mess this up, but Jacopo, I hope that my response wasn't too crazy. If you do have a clarifying question, feel free to pop it into the chat.
Good morning, everyone. May I step in now?
Yes, of course.
Yes, hi. I'm Alessandro Belluzzo, the president of the Italian Chamber of Commerce. Sorry, I couldn't be present today. I'm joining shortly to another event outside London. Thank you very much. I was listening on the background, and such an informative event, very well addressed. So thank you very much for the support and what you've done today. I think our members and the community benefited a lot from this seminar, and I think we can certainly organize a follow-up one. And in the meantime, we remain available to any support you may have. And please don't be shy. It's important that we exchange questions, informations, and views, because the situation is clearly difficult to understand. And thank you very much again. Thank you to my other colleague, the other president of the chamber, Stephen, that spoke before me. Thank you to my team and to the sponsors and to the organizers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandro.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here today.
It's
Thank
been
you
a
for
pleasure.
inviting
Thank
us
you,
as well.
Erin.
Thank you.
Very much.
And Emily. Stephen, enjoy Milan.
Grazie. Buona serata.
Buona serata.
Buona serata. Ciao.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.